Evening, everyone. One more minute. I have actually added a Wikipedia, Latonia. Good question. I've also attended so many hack updates at this point that I would say 85 to 90% of my wardrobe is hack update t-shirts. But every now and then one will escape. Anyone can edit Wikipedia. It doesn't just have to be necessarily a volunteer. You just have to, when you make the edit, you have to cite another source of why you've made that edit, and then they will approve it and let it go through, depending on how locked down the page is, basically. So obviously, a little bit harder to edit Donald Trump's Wikipedia page than it would be to edit some obscure person that died 100 years ago.
Can I ask you another question about that?
Yeah.
I have a friend, one of her goals, her life goals is to have a Wikipedia entry. How does that happen? Does someone just say, hey, this person is cool or awesome or whatever?
I think there needs to be enough like coverage in about them in the media for it to justify a page getting created. So I think the threshold is a little bit harder to create a page from scratch than it is to like go in and edit someone else's page. But it all comes down to like how Wikipedia cites everything. And so if you can cite, enough media talking about you, or like link to you being published somewhere in Library of Congress or something like that. It's kind of, I want to say, kind of similar to like getting verified on Twitter. When people have like the blue check mark next to them, they need to be a public figure, and Twitter has like a whole process for proving that you are a public figure and have enough of a following. So yeah, lots of different ways to get in there. It is pouring, Carolyn, down at the beach today. There was a pretty big thunderstorm that just moved through, so not quite a lovely day at the beach. At least not at the South Jersey beach that I am at.
Yeah, I haven't been at this particular beach in a long time. It is heaven on earth for me. It's a lot of memories. So I figured I'd have it as my backdrop so I could kind of pretend I was there. But no,
Nice.
I'm in my basement, which is not finished, so it's not beautiful. But it's not horrible. I've been in cellars and this isn't, but yeah, no. So here I
Awesome.
am at
Well,
the beach.
let's kick it off. What did we cover yesterday? My oh my, we covered a lot yesterday. Lots of little things. Who wants to get us started? We did pagination or pagination. I still don't know what the right way to pronounce that is, but yeah, this notion of how do we get multiple pages worth of information to show up in our table without it being this huge thing. So probably a little bit more involved to get set up than I'm guessing you guys thought it would be, but a very common feature to see, especially when you're dealing with pages and pages of data. Of all right, how do we split this up across multiple pages? And so we did a little bit in the front end. We utilized a little bit of Bootstrap. We moved things into the state. Then we integrated that with our back end with a little dash of math added in for you. So definitely a lot going on there. We did a little bit of a scroll example and remembered why CSS absolutely hates me as a human being, and added in a little div wrapper container and got our table to scroll. What else did we cover? So we did verification of the zip code, and we definitely talked through why we want to do verification on the front end and the back end. We did a little Postman example to show of how we could bypass our front end validation and submit things to the back end and ultimately to the database that we didn't want to end up there. So we talked a little bit about adding verification onto our back end. What else? We did use state and use effect. Definitely, again, something that we've already touched on a little bit, but hopefully the use effect with the dependency array was a good example of when we would need to use effect with the dependency of, hey, I'm updating page number in my state. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just write code in one place and have the effect of that state update do something? And so we did that in lots of different places, right? We had the next button, the previous button, all the individual page buttons. But it was nice to be able to say, hey, whenever we change any of those, go ahead and run this code, make the API call, make a change happen. So we covered two things that we kind of breezed by yesterday. Use ref, which is the hook that React provides you to be able to interact with the DOM, the document object model, or more specifically, React's virtual DOM. And then we also went through HTML4 and regular for, and how because for is a reserved word in JavaScript that HTML changes it a little bit. We talked about indexing, specifically tab indexes. Yes. Indexing, you confused me there for a second, Latonia, because indexing is normally used in the database. We talk about indexing in terms of optimizing our database so that when we write where queries, the where queries are indexed. So it basically makes it easier to search or filter through our database if that column is already indexed. But what we covered yesterday was tab indexing of, okay, there were 4 different ways we could say, all right, when we hit the tab key in first name, we want it to end up in last name. And those 4 ways were, we'll just redesign it so it makes more sense visually, and we go to last name. The second way was we could move around our HTML, and instead of having 3 rows with 2 columns in them each, have 1 big row with 2 big columns, and then have the form fields in those. We didn't actually code out that approach, but that would be another way to fix it. Then we explored tab index a little bit and talked about accessibility and the impact on that. But that was definitely a solution that worked well and was a pretty easy one. And then I way overcomplicated things and said, oh, we could also do it on a key press, and detecting if the key pressed was a tab key, go find the next input using a ref and focus on it. But that was so much overcomplicating that I didn't even code out that example. What else did we do related to on key press? Or in the same family of on key press? Something with the phone number? Yes, we approached the phone number formatting and made it so when we tabbed out or clicked out of that phone number input, it automatically formatted the phone number with parentheses and dashes. So we combined the power of an on blur effect event, excuse me, in React with a template literal, and then used our substring to kind of pull those numbers out and dump them into the right formatting. I believe that was everything. It's everything I had on the list. Anything else that we covered yesterday? Maybe a light bulb moment that you had from yesterday, or a win you've had in your capstone? Anything you've seen in the news? Any questions? Just opening the floor up.
Well, my thing goes back to the beginning of module 7, because I've been going back through trying to really get that stuff, so this stuff makes more sense. And it's one of the exercises we had trying to show it in on the server, the local host. And it wasn't working. I kept getting these errors and trying to figure out what I do wrong. I looked at your code to see if anything would jump out at me, looked back at my code, and a half an hour later, it hit me. I had put in res rec instead of rec res, which I didn't see because it's just it just was letters, and I don't know why I even typed it that way. I have no clue. Dyslexia, I don't know. But it suddenly dawned on me, just on my own, not that there's anything wrong with getting help, but I'm like, you can't do it that way. You can't get a response unless you've asked something. It's like, I got it. It wasn't just, so even though it's way behind where we're at now, I was very happy yesterday when I had that moment.
I think it's easy to be learning all of this stuff and just accept like, oh, well, that's the way it is, right? Like someone made it so the request comes first and the response comes second. Like that's what I'm being told I have to do. So it's like a kid asking their parent why, and the parent goes, because I said so. Right.
Why?
and so I think you go through that a lot when you're learning programming, but then all of a sudden something clicks and you go, well, of course, the backend's job is to get requests and then to send responses to those requests. So it kind of makes sense that for every endpoint, we're getting some requests coming in and sending some data back in a response. And that's when it clicks and it's like, oh, my parent just didn't tell me to use rec and res because they said so. They're telling me to use it because that's the design pattern. That's what the backend is supposed to do. A backend wouldn't really make any sense if it couldn't receive information or send information back.
Right. And I was just thrilled that I got the why of it.
Yes.
It like dawned on me, and I don't know if it was based on anything we've been taught or I just suddenly just got it, and then obviously, but I was saying to my husband, if you start getting answers and you haven't asked a question, then you're sort of wondering what you're hearing. But yeah, so I was real excited. I plan to not let that be my only aha moment, but I was really thrilled for what it's worth.
No, thank you for sharing.
Thanks for letting me.
the simple light bulb moments are sometimes the most rewarding of them, right? Like, it sounds so silly, and yes, it sounds so small, but it is a light bulb moment. It is an accomplishment. And again, that's why I keep on saying we celebrate different errors, because we will be fixing things and get a different error and go on to fixing that next error. And it's like, hold on, you just fixed something, you learned something, you either searched it or you pulled something out of the archives and you went, oh, I've had this error before, I remember how to fix it. We celebrate different errors, we celebrate getting through this and moving on to the next thing, and ultimately we need to celebrate it working as well, right? Like, that's a big thing to go, all right, we're shoving content at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, right? A true boot camp. But being able to understand all of this is really what matters.
Well, I was so excited. I took Hello World and I added all this stuff to it. Message for my husband to see. It's like, okay, now you can go on to the next thing. Okay. But I was just so thrilled.
And I would say that when you guys are in the workforce, most likely as a junior developer, you will have a senior developer on your team or someone else in the company that you can go to with questions. But keep that public schedule for cohort 2 nearby, because at work you may find, oh, they're using a different framework or a different language or whatever it may be, but sometimes you just need to reinforce those concepts. And so I can't tell you, I still get messages from cohort 1, what, a year and a half ago at this point now, where students are like, I just rewatched your video on blah, blah, blah. And you know, that made me able to get it at work. So keeping your own notes is a very good idea, but you know, having reference, these videos don't go anywhere at the end of the cohort. They forever live on YouTube. And so feel free to reference them down the road. There are definitely concepts. I'm going to be tuning into the security and the DevOps module myself. I'm like, oh man, let me learn from a pro. Yeah, I know that's, I have to do that stuff at work, but I'm probably not doing it right. So there are definitely classes that I tune into as well. So definitely use these resources to your advantage. Okay, so any other questions before I start ranting again?
Hi, Max, this is Shah. I have a question. Maybe it's more of an observation. Recently, in the last week or two, I spent a lot of time debugging my code. This morning, I pulled the front end from Git repo, but still it wasn't working. So I had to remove modules and also the JSON log file, install everything. Then again, I mean, different things. So I spent almost an hour debugging or looking at the database, different things. So is it, I mean, normal to spend more time debugging when you have a lot of files, you have backend, front end, and also complex kind of things?
Absolutely, yeah. And at the beginning of a job, it's often expected that it's going to take an entire week for you to just be able to get all the code that the company has up and running. That is referred to as setting up your environment or your dev environment, because they're going to hand you a computer that's off the shelf, hopefully a Mac, and they're going to say, all right, this is yours. Our code's over here. Go have fun. And sometimes you get lucky and their documentation is good, but oftentimes you just get this code and you're like, okay, I've got to install things, and you're going to get a different error, and then you're going to go solve that one, and then go to Stack Overflow and then find that answer and move on to the next one. And you're going to get this shiny green message that says server started, you're all good to go. And you're going to load up your code, and then it's going to crash in the front end. You're going to be like, motherfucker, you told me it was working. And then you're going to, you know, regroup and figure out that next thing. So it is, in general, it is common to spend as much time debugging your code as it is writing new code. But especially when you're doing project setup for the first time and coming into an established code base, there are a lot of moving pieces here, right? It's not just the front end. It's not just the back end anymore. It may be some configuration in the back end. It may be that the database isn't talking to the back end because the names are slightly different on different servers. It may be that your database is actually up and running, but there's some data that you need in the database, like users. So before you can even sign in, your database needs some information in it. So there are all kinds of places that it can go wrong. And now that we're in a full stack project, there are definitely even more of them. So very common at the beginning of project setup to be spending a lot of time debugging. Even beyond that, the debugging to writing code ratio gets to be more in tune. And as a senior developer, as you get more experience, that debugging ratio tends to drop down, but only if you're debugging your own code, right? So you do get better over time at writing your code with less bugs in them inherently. But as you move up to a senior developer, chances are you will be helping other junior developers get more experience. So now you are spending less time writing your own code, but more time debugging a junior level's code or someone else's code on your team. And that debugging ratio starts to get more back to that center point. So very common to spend a lot of time debugging, nothing to be worried about. And there are some people who are professional debuggers, and all they do is get other people's code and go through it and understand it and debug it. So there is lots of opportunity to be doing debugging. The only thing that I would be a little bit concerned about is if a lot of your debugging at this point in the program was coming from just syntax errors, right? Like if you were just missing parentheses or curly braces or something like that, I would be more concerned. I miss HTML closing tags all the time, so I'm not worried about that, but more at a syntax level of just, like, I missed a comma, I missed a parenthesis, I don't know why this code isn't running. That's what I would be concerned about. But for the most part, debugging is just a natural part of getting a project set up and running code and working through it. And most of the classes I have had something that I could reference. So I wasn't actually writing this code from scratch. This was code that I had rewritten, earlier in the day. I mean, the previous weekend. I mean, at the beginning of the program, and could run through it, which is why you would see less debugging. But at this point in the program, joking aside about being prepared, I do think there is value in you seeing a debugging process and me trying to write this code kind of on the fly, right? So there is a tipping point of when you're learning this for the first time, you don't want too much debugging going on because it's like you're trying to learn too many concepts at once. But at this point in the program, hopefully you're more comfortable with the syntax and the concepts. So when we do run into issues, we can expose a little bit more of that debugging process. I will say that debugging in front of other people is just much harder than debugging it yourself. And there are times that I will talk through my debugging and try and give you some insight into it. But there are also times where I'm like, go take a 5-minute break. And when you come back, I'll be able to explain it, right? Like it's just this. I swear, I don't know if they've ever done a study on this, but there's a physiological response that make you have more typos when someone else is watching you type. I don't know what it is. I am a fine typist when no one else is watching me. And just as soon as someone's looking at my output, it's like, oh my God, I just fat finger everything. Definitely something to consider, and great question, Shaw. Debugging definitely makes you better at coding as well. There are things that, when you get better at understanding that the error message is not just telling you that your code is wrong, but the error message is trying to tell you why your code is wrong. That definitely makes you a better programmer. And also catching errors before they end up, going out to a user. Okay, what happens if, they type in a 4-digit zip code? Oh, we should validate that. That is going to be a debugging thing where a user may report that as a bug and say, well, only 4 digits of the zip code are showing up. And you dig into it and you're like, I can't figure out why only 4 digits are showing up. And then you realize, well, they only typed in 4 digits. So there was no form validation set up to make sure zip code was actually 5. So it is definitely a cycle of debugging and releasing software, writing new features, publishing them or deploying them, and going through that whole process. Brielle, that is Brielle said that most of pagination is working, but if you hit previous on the first page, it crashes NodeMon. We can start out there tonight with fixing that. That is definitely something that is something that we would like to fix. And we'll actually fix that in 2 places to address the whole back end, front end. And then we'll go from there. I'm not sure, like in a technical interview, what that was in reference to, Carolyn.
We're talking about if someone's watching or they're
Oh,
there.
yes. If
Makes it
someone
more
is
challenging.
watching,
So it's like, yeah, they're sitting back in the other way room going, what's she doing? Yeah.
yes, for sure. Or when you're pair programming, or part of it is a nerves thing, even if you have nothing to be nervous about. I don't know what the impact of it is. It's like I'm confident in the code that I'm writing, and I still just cannot type like I normally do. So I'm not sure what the psychological impact of that is, but it's just something I've noticed. Okay, so let's dive into what we're doing tonight. We're going to do a quick pagination fix on the previous button, and we should probably fix the next button as well. So we will dive into that both on the back end and then the front end. While we are rocking both the front and back end, we're also going to talk a little bit about search. And searching, if we have all the data, how we can implement that on the front end. We are going to get a little tricky with state and showing search results in the table. And then when we clear out the search, being able to get back to the previous table. So we're going to go into that a little bit. And then we are going to talk about the backend implementation of all of that and how we can make our database do the search, which is actually going to be much more efficient, especially on large data sets. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about middleware. Middleware is kind of one of those hard concepts to teach in a vacuum. It's like the concept is out there, but you kind of have to see it in use to understand it. And unfortunately, the most common use of a middleware in the back end is authentication, which is probably the most complicated thing you can do in the back end, especially if you're doing it securely, and integrating that into the front end, right? Because there's a lot of auth that lurks in the front end as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about getting our login page working, implementing some middleware in our back end, and validating our endpoints. From there, if we have time, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can do a service order join, and do our has many association or has one, and build out our customer table and try and get that working as well. Kyle, do you want to share your screen with the code issue or paste it in Slack, or?
It wasn't an issue. I was able to fix it real quick. I was just curious about it. Yeah, we can come back to it if you want, or
no, we can do it now.
Okay. So in our use effect, when we were testing we had console log run in there when we were testing the pagination, and I'd forgotten the semicolon at the end of the console log with the run in parentheses, and I get an error that console log is not a function, which it is. And I was able to figure that out and fix it pretty quickly. But then I was just wondering, I think it was probably trying to pass like the whole async function to console log as a parameter or something, but I don't know why it would say that it's not a function if it was trying to do that. So I was just curious.
Yeah, we use that shorthand, and did the parenthesis async parentheses arrow function and then the two parentheses at the end of it. The side effect of using a shorthand is sometimes that you get caught, not having a semicolon in the right place. I'll say 98% of JavaScript code that you write doesn't actually require a semicolon at the end of it anymore. But those 2% cases where it does need a semicolon at the end will bite you pretty hard. So I'm guessing it was something related to that, of just because we use the shorthand, the semicolons mattered, and that's why it broke there. It is entirely possible. If you remember last night, we got a cores error, and it was like, well, that makes no sense. Like our backend is set up with cores, and like we're even already pulling data down, so we know cores isn't an issue. But at the end of the day, it was giving us an error on cores. Well, I think it turned out that we weren't stringifying our body before we sent it up, but that was confusing cores right when the request came in and kind of threw us off the scent in the error message, and in that stack trace. So you do need to be careful of like, all right, I understand that the error is this, and most of the time my error will be somewhere around that code. But you do over time develop a gut feeling of oh, I've had this before, or cores has burned me before and said it's a cores error and it's not really a cores error. Let me go look somewhere else before I dig into that. And so console log is one of them. The word I spell wrong probably most of the time is the word console, because I'm typing so quickly that I get a cos noli is not defined, and it's like, oh right, that was just fat fingered. I really wish autocorrect for programmers was more of a thing. There's autocomplete, but not autocorrect. I don't think I would ever want to type the word cos noli ever in any of my code. So you would think that would just be something that would autocorrect for me. There is actually a GitHub project out right now. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's essentially applying AI and NLP to help developers write code. And it's starting to like look at data structures and figure out that you need to loop over that data structure. And so like it will just autocomplete the whole for loop for you, or do like even a nested for loop if you want it. So I'm blanking on the name of that. It was actually posted over in Syracuse IO. I want to say in the JavaScript channel. But maybe it was in random. It was somewhere over in the Syracuse IO Slack. And I've been meaning to try it out, but have not had the chance. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure if you scroll through Slack, you would be able to find it somewhere. But it's not jumping out to me, so I will not waste your guys' time on that. Carolyn, the macros are kind of one of those things that are dying a slow death, but never truly ever go away. I have a macro program that literally is 20 years old, and I use it every morning to open all of my applications. Because I reboot my computer every night. I don't like leaving my servers running overnight. And then I have a terminal to open. I've got my music app, my messaging, my text messaging, and Slack to open. I have the front end and back end code that I work on every day to open. In my terminal, I have to start both the front end and back end servers. And then I have to open up the browser and go to Chrome and go to my running code. So I actually have a program called Keyboard Maestro that opens all of my programs for me on a macro. I spent probably 45 minutes setting up the macro, and now it saves me 3 minutes every morning, because it's automatically just opening all of that up for me. So macros are still a thing, but they are not commonly used in programming. The thing I would say is probably closest is Emmet. Emmet is where you can type the exclamation mark in an HTML file and hit tab, and it just auto completes it for you. There are file templates, and when you get into more of an IDE over just a standard text editor, there are more features kind of built in there. Karen, the in-house personal server question, I still haven't been sold on the need for an in-house personal server unless you're doing like a lot of home automation stuff. Every developer I've worked with who has had a in-house personal server has had more complications and more configuration and more DevOps work they have had to do than if they were running the server locally. It's kind of like Docker, one of those great ideas in theory. Docker is this notion of I can hand you one file called a Docker file, and you can run it, and it's going to set up your front end and your back end and your database servers and just install whatever the dependencies are, configure them automatically on the right ports, and everything is just up and running, and you can just dive in and start using it. In reality, Docker adds another layer or two of confusion. And when it works great. When it doesn't, there are more things you need to configure. So me personally, as a developer, I always run my servers on my computer directly. But in theory, it is possible to use something like Docker to have those dev environments automatically configured for you. Or there are some people that actually have a server in their house, and they test their code on that server and set up all kinds of file syncing so that when they edit the file, it also updates over on the server. Worked with developers that have done that. I'm not sold on it. It also depends on the project. If you're working on some project where you're crunching, a couple hundred gigabytes of data through a database, running that on your local computer, obviously not as ideal. So in-house personal server, for me personally, opinion-wise, I don't think they are worth it, but because we are rebooting our server so frequently when we're editing our code, there's more that can go wrong. There are runaway processes that can get stored in memory, and that's why I like to reboot. Yeah, Karen, personal data servers are getting more popular. There's this notion of like, I want the cloud to be in my own house. And can I store data that I'm working on locally instead of having to upload it to the cloud, which is kind of funny because it's a whole pendulum that's swung. It used to be that every server was in your office and there was no such thing as the cloud. And then AWS came out and the cloud is like this hot trendy thing that everyone is moving over to. And a lot of businesses are still struggling to move to the cloud. But then there's this whole pushback of like, but if my smart water bottle company goes out of business and runs in the cloud, I would still like that water bottle to work without me having to run the data through their cloud. So it's a pendulum that swung back and forth, but a very opinionated topic, and not something where there is a right or wrong answer, more just pros and cons on either side. All right, let's dive into some code. We're going to fix our pagination issue first. So I am going to share my screen. I have my front end open and my back end open. Before I forget, I'm going to npx nodemon server.js and npm start.
Excuse me, do we need to pull anything, or is everything, like, did you do anything since class yesterday's?
I haven't since class yesterday, but everything is in module 7, week 3, day 2 code, if you do want to start from where I am starting.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I've got my appliances are us over here. I've got my code in the front end. My code, always forget to CD into my appliance backend. Every day this week I have done that. npx nodemon, we got our server running. I'm going to hit my login button. We'll wire that up in a second. We've got our table here, and we nicely have this scroll in here, I might add, in addition to our pagination, because my window's so small. If I pull it up, it's not going to be there anymore. And so if I hit the previous button here, I get this lovely error message that offset must not be negative. Okay, well, that is not going to help me out too much because it's not giving me a line number. And that's a pretty common thing on your database queries, because it's your database code that is yelling at you and not actually your JavaScript itself. Sometimes it can be hard to find the what query is failing. So what we are going to do is, this happens to be the only place I'm using an offset. So to fix this, we're going to do a simple if page is less than 0, then res.send my regular customer data back, except this time offset it with 0. So if I save that and refresh over here, now when I hit my previous button, if page is less than or equal to 0, excuse me, refresh. Now when I hit previous, it's still crashing on me. Well, what do you think my page number is? save, refresh. I'm going to just restart it completely. Okay. I'm going to refresh here. I'm going to hit previous. It's interesting. It's coming in 1 and then coming in 0. Oh, I'm res.sending here, but I'm also res.sending my other code. I forgot an else. Talking about errors where you don't think they would normally be. Okay, let's try that again. Now I'm going to hit previous. It's logging out that it's -1 and it didn't crash, right? So it's just showing that previous data. Okay, that's helpful, but we fixed our server crashing. We should also probably fix that over in the front end, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to remove our console log before we forget. And what we are going to do is switch over to our VS Code, scroll down to our previous button and say disabled is going to be if the current page num is equal to 1. I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here and refresh. I'll pop open my inspect because I'm curious to see if that is working. And it does say disabled. And if I go to my network tab, blow that up and click previous, well, it's a little liar. Disabled. Let's go to Bootstrap, take a quick look at their documentation for pagination. Disabled and active states have to be a class that goes on it. Okay, so instead of doing disabled here, we're going to take this off, and then say class name, turn this into a template literal. And that is actually happening on our LLI tag. So sorry, wrong one. It's going to happen up here. So we are going to say in our template literal that if current page num is equal to 1, then show disabled, otherwise show an empty string. Now, if we come up here to our code and refresh, now our previous button is actually grayed out on us. And so we don't have to worry about someone clicking on that. We should also probably do that for the next button and say, if I'm gonna grab this whole class name, gonna drop it down here, and then I'm going to say if current page num is equal to total pages, then make it disabled. So we come over here and I click through to page 3. I click to get to page 4. Now next is disabled here, so we don't have to worry about clicking next and moving through. So 2 quick little React fixes, just using our LI and using a class name that Bootstrap has provided for us. I will take a break there, and just in case anyone would like to follow along, I will launch the poll and dump this into the pasted code channel. anyone have questions on that ternary operator or how we pulled that off? Okie doke. Give you guys a minute to work on that. Feel free to shout out any questions as you come across them.
Max? Hi,
Yes.
it's Carolyn.
Yep.
Hi, sorry. This is crazy here with my son and his friends upstairs. I can't hear anything. I was trying to get my NPX nodemon server.js to work, and I sent my question to Karen to figure out the error, but I didn't see any of what you just did in that file.
What I did in customers.js is I added a class name to our previous and next button and disabled them if we were on certain conditions.
Okay. Thank you. And that's in the back end customers.
No, that's in the front end.
Front end customers. I'm getting dizzy. All right, thank you.
Max, could you share the change you made to the server side with the if pages are less than or equal to 0?
Sure can.
Thank you.
I'm just going to share that one endpoint just so it's not a giant swath of code. Oh, no. Shared. Only 3 votes in so far, so go ahead and get your votes in unless they're still working. Then as always, just give it a second. have 6 votes, 7 votes in. I will wait for one more or give you guys one more minute and then we will keep going. Feel free to ask questions if you're stuck anywhere.
Hey, Max, I have a question. This is Latonia.
Shoot.
I had a question about what we were talking about earlier. Are there ever use cases or scenarios where a company will deploy and prefer that the public finds bugs in the code, or is that something that's just generally never ever done?
There are bug bounty programs out there where if you do find a bug and report it, especially a more on the security vulnerability side, that the company will actually pay you cash in a reward or as compensation, as encouragement to report that bug through secure channels. And have them get it fixed before you go out and brag to all of your friends that you found a security bug in the code. And you laugh, but that's what normally happens, right? Is that people will find bugs, especially if there's like customer data leaking out, and go brag to their friends, and all of a sudden someone will use that maliciously to go steal data from somewhere and start spamming emails or stuff like that. So a lot of companies will have bug bounty programs set up, BOUNTY, for literally paying you off for reporting that or bringing that bug in, so to speak. Apple has one of them. I don't know. I know Tesla does. I believe Google does. So big companies are definitely involved in that. But there are also times that you may not know about a bug until your customers get in and use it, right? It may be an issue that you only run into when 1,000 different people are using your website at the same time. And then you go, oh, there's a problem. We only expected user ID to be 3 digits long. And now we have 1,000 users and there's no place to store that in the database. And so new accounts can't be created. So it's not normally something where you think, oh, let me throw this out to the public and they'll find issues. But there are definitely times that you go, all right, let's release this as an alpha to maybe people who work inside of the company and get their feedback on it. Okay, now let's release this as a beta where we will pull in a couple of our customers, but tell the customers, heads up, this is new code. You're the first one using it. Here's how to properly report bugs. And then hopefully by the time it actually makes it to production, there aren't as many bugs in it, but there are always going to be bugs that pop up in production that you need to fix. Jahil, I'm not sure if people do that like full time as a bug bounty hunter. There are probably people who have made decent money from it. I believe Tesla actually has offered up a car in the past for reporting some of their bugs. They have basically said that if you are able to hack into our cars remotely and be able to like control them or impact the steering or anything like that, that is a serious enough bug that we will actually give you a car if you can figure out how to do it. There are people who have figured out how to hack a Tesla if they have access to like the internals of the car and actually have like been able to plug things into it. But no one has been able to figure out how to like remotely access someone's car, remotely access someone else's Tesla in particular, There was a hack a little while ago on, I want to say, Jeep vehicles, where they figured out how to actually remotely access the car and impact like the cruise control and stuff like that. So car hacking is a thing that will happen, but it is closely related to the pen testing field, the penetration testing field, and more of cybersecurity than it is more of the developer perspective. Although obviously experience as a developer would help understand the concepts of where vulnerabilities may lie. Just like with SQL injection, right? When we can understand, oh, what we're doing here is ending out our insert statement and running another SQL query. Those concepts would help when you're doing penetration testing or bug bounty programs or anything like that. Okie doke, we've got 9 votes in, so I'm going to roll forward with our search. Okay, so in my search, I am going to create, I'm going to figure out, I'm going to look at my front end first. I would like to put a search field kind of up at the top that allows me to search. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go above my table. I'm going to add an input type equals text. And we will say, let's do a state on this, just because it's not really part of a form. So we are going to say on change, grab the event and set my search input to my event dot target dot value. And then my value of that input is going to be my search input. And I'm going to save that and come back up. And now, of course, it doesn't know what set search input or search input is because we haven't set that up in state. So we're going to say const search input and set search input is equal to a use state that's going to start out as empty. And I'm going to pop over to my browser and there it is. But man, that is not pretty. So maybe we come back down to our input and we say, hey, let's throw a class name on there of form-control. And also let's put a placeholder in there that says search by name. I'm going to refresh. Okay, that's looking good. Don't love how wide it is, but I also want a search button to show up over on the right. So maybe what we can do is throw this in a div class name equals row and make this a div class name equals col 10 and grab my input and throw it in the col 10 and then grab another div with a class name of col-2 and we'll put a button with a class name of btn and btn primary and we'll make that say search. I can dig it. Maybe we'll do a little cleanup on that and add a style at the top of it of a margin top 10 and a margin bottom of 10. Guys are all coding pros, right? You did that just as fast as I did. You're good to go. I am going to copy that whole row into Slack. At this point, I am not afraid of you guys copying and pasting the code. But I pasted it in Slack just in case you need it. What I will say is if you have questions at this point of like, whoa, how did you get that column working? Or how did you clean up that form input so quickly? Or what's the BTN primary? Any questions like that whatsoever, feel free to throw out at me, right? Because when you are as experienced as I am with Bootstrap, there are just classes that are rattling around in the back of my brain. And while you can get all of that information from the documentation, if you're not sure as to why I'm doing something the way I am or what the code is doing, just scream bloody murder and go, stop, stop, stop. Why did you do that?
Max, can I just see how you formatted the search and the set up top?
No, what makes you think you can ask questions?
You told us to ask questions.
Yeah, so the search, are you saying for the use state or just the form control?
Yeah, for the use state, I put in const and then I did search input, set search input, because I thought that's what you said, but I missed it. I just want to make sure I got it right. Okay.
You have it right, and I will paste that into Slack as well.
Max, one other thing is it's better to use a closed input tag rather than self-closing tags in React because React doesn't like self-closing tags, correct?
Totally correct.
Okay, thanks.
I'm kind of surprised Prettier didn't fix that for me. I feel like Prettier, when I use my other text editor, will change the self-closing tags on me, but maybe I'm just dreaming. But you are completely right. In that circumstance, because we're using React, we should use a self-closing tag. All right, I see you guys working, so I'm going to relaunch the poll just because I don't want to.
And can I ask another question?
Yep.
For the table, because my code is different from yours, I didn't want to just copy and paste it, but it's on your table where you have the striped. I'm just trying to get a location where I can figure out where I should be to get that.
It is, my table is down here, and I've got a div where I did the scroll.
Table hover. It's right over that?
Yep.
Or is that whole section?
It's right over that. It's above that div. This whole thing, this div is what I added.
Oh, I see. So just add it in over that div.
Over the max height div. Yes.
Okay. All right. And then I've been using event, just typing it out. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, my code's working. That's not like some kind of legacy thing. Okay.
Yep. Nope. You could call it E if you really wanted to hurt my soul. But anything else is fine to call it.
All right. Thank you. Max, this may be an unruly question. This is Latonia. But we use search by name. Is that, I mean, should we be worried about uniqueness? We keep talking about having unique identifiers. But I guess since it's just in this list, it doesn't matter. Like you would just get a list, but I just figured I'd ask.
Yeah. A lot of the times you'll see them say search, and then you're like, search what? Right? What if I want to type in a phone number there? Well, the search that we're going to set up is set up to only search through the name. So it is often common to see a query builder around search of, okay, what would you like to search? Do you need it to be an exact match, not an exact match? Do you want to search just by first name, or do you want to search by last name as well? So there are query builders that you can use. that help you build a more advanced query if it were something very common that a user would need to search by different pieces of information. So I kind of just set us up there as an easy in of, well, searching by their last name will probably be the most common thing that happens. So we're just going to do a search in the first name or the last name column, and just apply our search to that. But you could definitely get more complex here and say, all right, we want to search this specific field, or we just want it to contain this information, right? It doesn't have to be an exact match, or, changing the value that we're searching for. So query builders are kind of more common, but in this case, we're just going to focus on searching in the name only. All right, I've got 8 votes in, so I'm going to keep going here. So I am going to go, I need to now link up my search button to actually do something. So I'm going to say on click. You know what? It's going to drive me crazy if I don't do this. We should really make this a form and make this button a type equals submit, and then on submit search names. The reason why I made this a form, and remember to update my closing form tag, is that if we hit the enter button and this is just a regular button that is not type submit, the enter button isn't going to do anything. But if we put our button in a type submit and make this whole thing a form, that will actually make it so when we hit enter, it will trigger our search names function. So that's why I like using a form whenever we have an input, especially if that input needs to do something when we hit the enter button on it. So I just changed the opening form and closing form. I added my type submit, and then I added my on submit function to the form tag. So that is not declared anywhere yet. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say const search names is equal to a function. And because we're submitting the form, we need to event prevent default. And just to make sure this is all wired up properly, I am going to console log out my search input, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to type in ABC and hit search and go to my console, and I got my ABC out. If I type in DEF and hit search, I get that out. All right, awesome. So what we are going to do is get our search working now. So I'm going to come back over here, and I am going to say, hey, where are my customers living? They're living in this array called customers. So customers.filter to give me an individual customer. And then if the customer.firstname.includes my search input, or my customer.lastname.includes my search input, then make it so the filter returns true or false based off of whether that includes is in here. And to see if all of this is working, I'm just going to console log it out. I'm going to refresh here. I'm going to see my McTesterson here. So I'm going to do a search for MCT and hit search and logged out my input. And if I pop this open here, I can see my McTesterson is the only one showing up. Great. But if I do a search for MCT in all lowercase, I didn't match on anything. we probably don't want to make our name case sensitive, that search. So what we're going to do is we are going to say .to lowercase and drop that both on our search input, but also on our form fields when we're looking at first name and last name. So we are going to still do our includes, but we're just lowercasing it before we make our check. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to do my search for MCT again. And now I get my McTesterson, even though McTesterson is capitalized. So that's a common trick of when we don't care about case, we just make both our input and the thing that we are searching for all in lowercase. And now all of a sudden it is not case sensitive anymore. Okay, that's great. There are two problems. I'd be surprised if anyone got the bigger problem, but what do we need to do next? What's the obvious thing we need to do? Render the search results into the table. Exactly. Show off databases is the third thing that we need to do. It's all right, we need to do this over in the back end. So I will get to that. Okay, so it should be as simple as saying set our customers equal to that array that we just filtered. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to do my search for MCT. I hit search and I get my McTesterson. Great. That's exactly what I want it to do. But I come over here. I clear this out. I hit search. Oh, crap. We need our data to come back in there. So what we're going to do is we could make another API call and get that data back, but that might be wasteful, right? We might have that data already stored. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to our use effect. And whenever we pull our data back in and set it to the customers, we're also going to store a copy in that called all customers. And that's going to be equal to our data.customers.rows. And then we need to declare that somewhere. So we're actually going to declare that up here. We're going to say let all customers equal null. That's redundant. Let all customers. Okay, so we've got all customers here. React is yelling at me. It's assigned a value, but is never used. Assignments from inside will be lost after each render. Stored in a use ref. Jesus. Maybe I'm cheating. Well, let's see if we need to care about that warning. So what I'm going to do is I am going to drop back down to my search names. And before I do my filter and all of that, I am going to say if search input is equal to my empty string, set my customers back to all customers. Otherwise, go ahead and do the filter like we originally had in there. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to say ABC, and I'm going to say MCT and hit search. I get my McTesterson. That's all working. Now I come over here. I clear out my search. I hit search again, and I get loading. Okay, well, that's not what I wanted. Let's do a console log of my all customers here. And then let's also do a console log of my all customers here. Refresh. I get my all customers here. I hit search and I get undefined. Okay, React is screwing with me a little bit. It does not like that I'm doing this in a use effect because this use effect is running multiple times during every time that we change the current page number. So sometimes access to our data becomes a little tricky during a use effect. So what I'm going to do instead is say, forget you, go down to the search, and before we set customers to our search results, what we want to do is say, all customers is going to equal our customers. And then we're going to set the search results. So I'm going to come in here and refresh. I'm going to do my search for MCT. I'm going to hit search. There's my McTesterson. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to hit search. I still get undefined. Oh, you know what? I probably need to scope my all customers outside of here. See, clear search. Okay, now I got everything back. So I'm curious to see if that would work in my use effect, because I don't like doing it here. The reason I don't like doing it here is what happens if we run 2 searches in a row and then want to clear everything out. Now it's only going to have that set. So I'm hoping that if we come back up to our use effect and say all customers is equal to data.customers.rows. Refresh. And do a search for ABC and search, and then clear our search and search again. Now I got it all back. Okay, so let me talk through that, and then I'll give you guys a chance to implement this. What the problem that we ran into is when I said let customers be in here, every time it rendered, every time that there was an update to the table, it was clearing out what my all customers value was, because every time it renders, it's rerunning all of this code all the way down to the return. So basically what I had to say was, hey, create this variable outside the component itself, because we are using that not like state, right? We're using that as kind of just a storing place, and we don't want that to clear every time it loads. So we created our let all customers out here. Then we came down and said, hey, whenever we get customer information from the database, go ahead and store all customers in here. And then in our search, we come down and we say, hey, if the search is empty, and I can take out my customers, set it back to the all customers. Otherwise, do our set customers based off of this filter that we create. Okay, that was a lot. Going to paste it into the code. And I am going to stop and pull and relaunch. So the end goal at the end of this is that you should be able to type in a search query and hit enter and see the search results in the table. So Karen just pointed out a flaw to me of what happens if you do a search for ABC2 and you search and you go, all right, oh no, I wanted all the ABCs. I didn't want the 2 to be in there. Well, now I'm going to search and I'm still getting ABC2, but we know if we clear out the search, there are other ABCs that should be popping up there. What we're doing in our code is we're filtering based off of the current customers. We should really be filtering based off of all the customers on every search result, not the result of the result. So if we change this to all customers, now when we do our search and we do a search for ABC2, we get our ABC2, but if we do another search for ABC, we get the other people in here. If I clear that out and hit search, we still get all of our results back.
Max, can you run through that again? I'm sorry.
Yep, no problem. So what we were doing before we found this flaw is we were saying, hey, filter based off of whatever the current customers are. So when we do our first search, you notice we have 2 ABCs and then an ABC2. So what we were doing before, if we did a search for ABC2, I'm proving my point, but ABC2 and hit search, we get our ABC2. But we know there are 2 other ABCs here. So if I just do a search for ABC, what I'm really searching on is these search results, not all the customers that we have stored. So when I do a search here, the other 2 ABCs should be showing up. But what our code is doing is it is searching our search results. It's not searching all the customers that we have. And so the way we can fix that is instead of saying do successive searches on what we have set into the customers now, instead always filter off all of our customers. So I come back here, I hit refresh. Again, if I do a search for ABC, I should be seeing this row, and this row. So I'm going to do a search for ABC2 first. I get my ABC2, but now when I hit my search and come back, it will filter that out for me. And if I clear it and hit search, I get everyone back as always. All right, I've got 5 votes in. I'm going to give everyone a couple minutes. It is 7 o'clock. So why don't we take a break and regroup at 7:15, and I will see you guys then. And I'll stick around for a minute just in case anyone has questions.
Yeah, it doesn't like my customers.first name. And I was just looking at the structure of the data and it looks okay. I don't need to put the index in there anywhere, do I? It says undefined. If
you want to share your screen?
Yeah. Let me put first name back in there. Sorry, just getting everything small enough to fit on the smaller screen. Go back to Zoom. So where's VS Code?
Your customers in your filter, your parameter needs to be customer because the filter is giving you access to each individual customer.
Oh, okay. I get confused with the plurals and singulars. This stuff.
And then you need to change your return as well because you want to look at each individual customer first name.
Okay, I had that and then I was having a different error. So I was like, oh, maybe I named it something different than you did. All right. Let's try that again.
Okay. Let's go back. Let's put between 76 and 77 before your return. Let's do a console log of both your search input and your customer.
Customer with plural or?
Singular. And then comment out your line 74, just so we're not intermixing
Oh,
too many
right.
console logs.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting name properly. If we scroll up, do we see the name row? Yep, they're there.
Yeah, sorry, got the wrong one.
Okay, let's go back to your code. I think it's got to be something with 2 lowercase. Customer dot first name dot 2 lowercase includes. Oh, you're missing a parenthesis after on your first 2 lower, actually on both your 2 lower cases. Right there. And also there.
Okay. First lowercase.
And if you want to comment out 77 too, I think that should fix it.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
Latonia, you're up.
Thank you. It was giving me a search names not defined, but then this happened.
Oh boy.
I know, I don't know what I did. And I deleted a chunk because it looked like I was just duplicating, like I had started typing it and then it went to where you had been. I know that doesn't sound right, but I felt like I was overlapping.
This is one where I'm just like, let me dive in and let's see what's going on.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, that's the section where I cut some stuff out, but I don't even see an error in there.
Yay.
It better not be. Okay. Because I did Control C, I tried it.
My guess is that there's a curly brace that's missing on one of these.
Curly brace, okay.
And it's, you know what? Let's go all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah, I did cut out a chunk. I should have just.
That's our curly brace for the return. Let's see what that curly brace is for. It's this line.
My goodness, we put a lot of code in on this.
We sure did. Okay, that is for your if total pages.
Okay.
So I think we need a closing one here. And then come all the way down and take this one out.
Oh, because I did
here.
just pop that one in there because it was doing something with the semi on the end of customers down there.
Be very lucky if this were.
It's taking a minute. Oh, if this works, oh, yay, Max, you're so awesome. So do you see my issue here, how I started doing my own code and then I went in and copied yours and just updated my events?
Yeah.
Can you help me find that, please?
You want to find this rogue one?
Yes, the rogue one needs to go. Search by name.
That's mine.
Okay, so it has to be over.
And this one is yours.
Okay. I was giving it a valiant effort. Okay.
You were close. And
Oh my baby. Oh
should be
yeah.
good to go.
Okay, good. Do you have like 2 minutes after class? I had a question on my capstone and I don't want to take more time if other people have questions now. So thank you. Excuse me, Max.
Yes.
Our search should be working, right? 'Cause
Are yes.
So I get an error that says cannot. Hold on, let me put something in there. See it again. Search. What does it say? Type error. Cannot read property filter of undefined.
What are you filtering on? On your all customers?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe go ahead and share your screen.
Yeah, all customers dot filter.
Did you add your all customers to your use effect?
Oh, I don't think I did. No, I put it in, I think, one place here. No, here, right? That's where we put it.
Yep. And then we need to, in our use effect, when we first load the data, we need to, after our set customers, data customers rows,
Oh,
we
okay.
added an all customers, which is what loads it in for the first time.
So was it a dot all customers?
No. On the next line, do a
What just happened? Oh, do a what? I'm sorry.
all customers equals data.customers.rows.
All customers equal data.customers.row. I don't have any ABCs, but okay.
Try clearing out your search and hit search again. Try clearing out the input and hitting search.
And then hit search?
Yep. And then do a search for Davis. There you go.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
You're good. People are late getting back tonight. Ooh. All right, so as everyone is getting back, from the two polls from yesterday, it seems like Friday at 6:30 will be the time for our office hours, unless there is a sudden rush in voting. So let me just put that in my calendar before anyone else can snag it as a one-on-one. So we'll do office hours at 6:30 on Friday. And then we also will spend tomorrow as a capstone day, a capstone working day. The only caveat to that is that you have to have questions prepared on your capstones. So your homework tonight is to figure out what questions or what you would like to work on your capstone tomorrow. I would like to focus specifically on making your capstone full stack and starting to think through the concepts that we've covered in the past 2, 3, 4 weeks of how to incorporate that into your capstone. So it won't be as truly open as a one-on-one of like, hey, I'm stuck here. How do I get past this? But if you can come up with full stack oriented questions on your capstone, I will gladly answer them tomorrow. And that's all we're spending the session on. So prepare some questions, review your code, and be prepared for tomorrow. Because if I am not hearing any questions for more than 5-ish or so minutes, I'm going to start randomly calling on you guys to screen share what you've got and talk through how you're planning on incorporating the backend into your capstone. It is not a strict requirement that you have the backend incorporated into your capstone, so you don't have to have that working. But it is highly encouraged because your employer will want to see, hey, this person has full stack experience, knows how to work in the database, knows how to build an API, all of that kind of stuff. So not a strict requirement to get your backend up and running in the capstone, but something we definitely want to encourage. Carolyn, question.
Yeah, it's occurred to me, are we having a career module with Laura on Friday, which is usually 6 to 7?
No, good.
Okay.
I'm getting a bunch of head shakes.
Okay,
I can check the schedule, but
yeah, I wasn't at the last one because I was sick and I haven't looked at the video yet, so I didn't get all the greatest news. All right, thank you.
every time someone asks me that, I think to myself, darn it, Max, need to check schedules before I offer times. But I trust you guys wouldn't vote for it in the poll if most of you knew that there was another obligation, because I definitely do not want to steal any of Laura's time. Interviewing, standing out. The next career session is the Friday after next on 7:30, and it is about values-based branding. Okie doke. So I am going to share my screen and let's dive back in. So I've got all of my customers here, right? And I've got my McTesterson and my DEF, but I'm going to move on to my second page. And all right, I've got some data here for number 2, right? So in theory, if I do my search for number 2 shows up. But what happens if I clear out my search and hit search and go to page 1 and now search for my customer 2? Well, I got my DEF2, but I know there's a customer 2 on the next page. So we just ran into a restriction of just filtering on the front end of, oh, I've got other data on the second page that I want to be able to search through. So I could start to get hacky and say, you know what, store all the customers, but don't limit all of that data. But now I have all of my customers coming to the front end just so I can search them, even though I am only showing 5 of them per page. So, there needs to be a better way for us to filter or search through all of our customers without having to get all of that data on the front end when our front end is only showing 5 of them at a time. And that is to search on the back end. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to our search names and we're going to comment all of this out and throw a comment up here that says search for front end. And then we are going to create our new const search for names. Search for names? Search names. It's still going to be a function. It's still going to event.prevent default. Oh, wrong place. EVT, down here we are going to event.prevent default. And now we need to figure out how to get our search working on the back end. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to make sure everything's lined up here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to do my search. Nothing shows up. I'm going to do a DEF. Okay, so everything's wired up. We're using our new search function. I'm going to leave a comment in here that says backend search. And now we need to do another API call. So this is actually going to become async. And we are going to say const response is equal to, I'm going to come all the way up to the fetch that we already have working and just deal most of that code. Okay, and now we are going to do a post request. And our post request is going to go to customers search. And it is going to have a headers with a content type of application JSON and a body that is going to be JSON.stringified with our search query, which is going to equal our search input. Okay, that's a lot. Let's see if it's even working. I'm going to switch to my backend. I'm going to server.post to my customers search, which is going to be an async rec res, which is going to console.log out my rec.body.search query, because that's what we're sending over here. And then we are just going to res.send back an empty object for now. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to do a search for DEF and hit search. Nothing happens, but if I come over to my backend, I've got my DEF search query. So I know my fetch is working in one direction, right? It's sending my search query up. So we still want to send back our customers, but we are going to await our customer, which is coming from the database. And we are going to find all where, and then we need to look at our model and say where the first name, and we need to get a little fancy. We need to use an operator in the database. And in order to use an operator, we need to pull that in from Sequelize. So we're actually going to say const op equals require Sequelize dot op. Op stands for operation. And so it's just a specific way we're going to query the database. And we are going to say where the first name is op.ilike, which is case insensitive. And it is going to be op.ilike, our template literal with % signs on either sign, and our rec.body.search query. All right, if you're not screaming the, oh my God, too fast now, I don't know what's wrong with you guys. There was a lot there. But I want to see if this is going to work, and then I will go through and explain all of it. So we are going to just console.log our data out. And we're going to refresh and do a search for DEF. And we're going to get a large fail that says, cannot read property ilike of undefined. Okay, it did not like me pulling in my op because I shouldn't have put curly braces around it because it's already coming out of my require. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to try my search again. I'm going to refresh, just clear everything, do a search for DEF. And I get my customers array with nothing in it, but I get no error. So I've got my DEF customer. I know they are there. But DEF is their last name. And I only did a first name query. So I'm going to do it on ABC instead. And then I get 8 customers that have a first name of ABC. Okay, pump the brakes. Let's go through that step by step again. So I had to do a fetch request, and I wanted to do a fetch request with a body. So because it has a body, I can't use a get. So what I did is I did a method post. I told it that, hey, my body is going to be application JSON. So body parser knows JSON's coming. And then in my body, I said, hey, stringify this. Internet doesn't like sending objects, has to send a string. And I'm going to send up my search query in the body and then the search input. Well, where's search input coming from? That's coming all the way at the top of my file from state. And that state is linked to my input using the on change and the value of my search query. So all this is doing is sending up to an endpoint called customer search. From there, I come over and I make a new post endpoint with customer search. I have to tell it, hey, it's asynchronous because I'm querying the database, and that is going to be a rec and a res. I console logged out my rec.body.search query just to make sure my DEF is working as it should. Okay, all of that shouldn't be out of the ordinary. Just going to comment that out before I forget. Now we get fancy. We're going to say, all right, we're going to res.send back our customers. That's normal. We have to await the database to run this query, return the results, and we want to find all the customers. But we want to find all the customers where something is true. Okay, where something is true, what field do we care about? We care about the first name. Now, in the first name, we want to use this op. Op stands for operator, and we know that's coming from Sequelize because we imported it at the top. This is Sequelize giving us a leg up in our JavaScript and saying, hey, we already have a bunch of these operators defined, so you can just lean on us and we'll figure out that operation for you. Now we want to do an I-like. An I-like, the I stands for case insensitive. And so the problem is we could dot to lowercase in our JavaScript, but we don't have access to all the first name fields to lowercase them when we do our database query. So we do an I-like, which is a case insensitive like. And then this percent at the beginning and the end of our search query is saying that there can be letters in front of it and there can be letters at the end of it. It doesn't matter. We're just searching for this term anywhere in the first name field. So that is this percent at the beginning and the end is the equivalent of our dot includes. And then adding this I in front of the like is the equivalent of our dot to lowercase in the filter. Okay, there's a lot there. I'm going to take a break, let you guys catch up. I will share this code.
So to make it search the last name as well, all you'd have to do is another or and basically copy and paste that same query inside the where.
Oh,
part.
our customers file is now too long for me to share in Slack. Yes, I will do that for the next step. We need to use the op.or for that, and I didn't want to complicate the I like query. So we will come back to that. And I'm going to launch the poll. And off you guys go. I lied. There's one more thing we're going to do. So we've got our console log data coming back here. And when we look in our console, we see our search results coming back. So all of that's great. All we need to do now is set our set customers to our data.customers. And so when we come to our front end and we do a search for ABC, we see all of our ABC customers across everywhere. Now we are breaking our pagination there, but we're going to just let that go for now. Okay, now I will let you go.
What does that mean? We're breaking our pagination, that it's not going to adhere to the 5 or?
Yeah, if you look at our, we've got more than 5 results now in the table, and it also says 1 through 4. So we would basically have to use our backend code up here to limit 5 and then figure out the offset and then update all the page numbers for the offset. So that's a rabbit hole we will just pretend like I didn't notice. But if you would like to attempt fixing that, you are welcome to. The hacky answer is we could limit the search results to just 5 of them and then say more results found, please be more specific in query, and make it so they only ever get 5 search results at a time. And if there are more than 5, we could say you got to help us out and make the query more specific. That's kind of the cheater answer. The better answer is probably to incorporate our pagination into the search results as well and update the total number of pages every time we do a search.
Max, can I ask a question?
Yep.
So in real world, you only do this on the back end, not front end.
Not necessarily. If you've got all the data on the front end, because that's how your interface is built, or hey, there aren't going to ever be thousands of records here. There are only ever going to be a couple hundred of them. There are times that you would want to build that search into the front end because the search on the front end will be faster if there are only a couple items than having to make a request to the back end, have the back end filter that data, and then pass it back to you in the front end. So if you're talking about a small data set where you happen to have all of that data already, there are times that you definitely want to build that search or that filter into the front end instead of building it into the back end. Chances are when you're working with the database, I would say 90% of the time, you want to do the search in the database instead of doing the search in the front end. But that is not, there is that 10% definitely pops its head out every now and then and says, no, there are times that you would actually want to do a search or a filter on the front end.
Thanks.
No problem.
A follow-up.
Yep.
So you can set up the search where you can search name where it includes only, let's say, A or B.
Yep.
So is it a good practice? Because in that case, you are restricting, or maybe I don't know how you call that. So can you do that?
Can I make it so
you can search, let's say, put the letter A and then search that only?
Are you saying that it would only start with the letter A? Because right
or
now,
anywhere. If it's anywhere, do you put that inside the percentage signs?
So right now, if I search for like just the number 3, it is going to do the right thing and show me all the places where last name includes 3 or first name includes 3.
Oh, it does. Okay. Sorry, it does. Okay, thank you.
Yep. And the reason it does that is these percent signs right here. The percent sign is the equivalent of saying dot includes when we did our front end filter. And then the I like is the equivalent of the .2 lowercase.
So then can you identify the number inside, the number of letters that returns, or no?
What do you say? Like it has to include at least a certain number of these?
Exactly, I can, yeah.
Oh, you would have to start getting into a regex to do
I
that.
see.
And it is possible to query a database using a regex.
Okay, thanks.
And Kyle, if you were wondering how I would do the or on first name, last name, I just cheated and threw that in. And I will update that in Slack as well if you would like your search to work on both the first name and last name.
I'm wondering why is all the op, like the opt.I like and opt.or, why are those in like, is it an array or?
You know, I should have written down, Kyle is going to ask question of why those are in square braces, because I knew that was coming and I like just should have had it prepared.
You can get back to me on that's okay. Don't worry about it.
No.
I still haven't got my code working, so.
It's a good question. So basically opt.or, if we console log out our opt.or and then make just the search again and look in our backend, you see how it says symbol or? That's like what Sequelize is doing under the hood. But whenever we want, like if we said
so symbol like the type or
let me do it as a different example, which will make more sense. Say I've got my key of ABC and I would like to console log out an object that has my key with a value of value. Well, I would like my key to show up as ABC. And if I put this out of here, it will show up every time I save. So when I log out my key, I'm getting value. Well, I don't want it to say my key. I want it to actually say ABC, which is up here. So the way we can make an object have a dynamic key is that we can put this in braces. And now my object will actually be ABC with value.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a way to specify if you would like your object to have a dynamic key, or basically have the key be based off of a variable, we can use these square braces. And so that's probably the cleaner example of explaining it. And so the same thing goes for our opt.or here. Opt.or is actually a variable that Sequelize is providing to us. So we want to tell our object to actually use the value that Sequelize is providing to us and not actually name our key op.or as a string.
Okay, that seems like that'd be useful if you were turning an object into an array, so you could like map over it or filter it or something, and then trying to convert it back to an object.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, it's just a way to have a dynamic key in your object. And this just happens to be a more complicated example because that dynamic key is being required in from Sequelize. And then on top of that, it's using symbols, which is like, I don't even have my head fully wrapped around. That's like advanced JavaScript voodoo. I don't get into symbols, but the square braces to have a dynamic key value is definitely something worth covering.
Max, did you send a poll out? I just want to make sure I didn't miss it. I'm shoving it around my screen.
I did.
You did? I must have closed it. I'm all set if you're looking at votes.
So we've got 6 votes in. I'll wait for 2 more.
Hi, Max. This is Shao. A quick question. So, sorry. So if you were to
You're
limit
good. I
the
just had to
search,
get my hand over to the
oh,
mute
that's
button.
fine. So if you were to limit the search based on users, like you have a manager and then you have regular technicians or
Yep.
staff. So you would add the conditions here, like where the name is equal to something, or you add what do you call it? Security settings or something like that.
Yeah, we're actually going to touch a little bit on that in our middleware, which we're going to cover next. The middleware, you could basically have it say, hey, if you're a technician, you should only ever see 5 customers at a time. But if you're an administrator, you may want to see your entire customer list. So you could actually do a limit based off of that and say, if the user.role equals technician, your limit's going to be 5. Otherwise, don't include a limit at all. So it's possible to do that, and you would do that at the backend level, at the API level. You wouldn't do that at the database level.
Thank you.
All right, still only 5 votes in, so give everyone 1 more minute, and then I will keep going. If anyone's getting an error or stuck anywhere, feel free to jump in, and I'm happy to help.
Mine's not working and I'm not getting an error. Did you still have the front end code pasted? I think you might have taken that down by mistake.
Oh, did I? Yeah, I did.
I think I've got it okay though.
All right, we've got 7 votes in. 1 more would make me happy.
I can share my screen, I guess, if you want to help me figure out what's going on with mine. Let me just move everything over here. So I'm not getting any error, but it's not working either.
Okay, let's go to your front end to start. And you're doing your search names, your posts, your set customers. Let's do a console log for data.customers before or after your set customers. Doesn't really matter.
Or just customers? Is that what you said?
Data.customers.
Right.
And then let's hop over and do a search. Okay, so we're getting results back. So if we scroll down in your code, oh, I'm sorry, in the browser window, in the actual table.
Oh, yeah.
It is filtering. It's showing just your Kyles.
Okay, yeah.
And if you refresh the page, it should show you everything. Yeah, so name there. So it is working.
It is working. It just, okay. It was behaving strangely.
I think you just had to scroll down to see that it was actually working.
Okay.
Cool. All right, so I will keep going. We have hit 8. So screen share working. It did something weird. You guys can see me. Okay, cool. All right, so we're gonna go on to middleware. So kind of changing pace here. We're gonna focus back on the back end. What if hypothetically I would like to know the time that every request has come in? Well, I could put it at the top of each one of my methods, but that seems inefficient, right? That's breaking the don't repeat yourself. So we've got this like app.use up here, and these are actually middlewares. Body parser and cores is a middleware. It's set up so that it will run some function in the middle of the request coming in before it hits our endpoint where we do the response. So we can actually create our own middleware, and we'll call this add time middleware. And middlewares have our rec and our res like normal, but it gets one extra next. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this thing called res.locals, which is a special place in our response where we can store some information for the next piece of our endpoint, the next point in the chain. And we're going to say res.locals.request time is equal to a new date. Now, for anyone watching this video down the road, technically our request time is already stored in our request. That's something that that Express does for us automatically. But for the sake of explaining how a middleware would work, we're going to add this into res.locals. And then what we're going to say is once you've added in that request time, go ahead and move on to the next function in the chain. So what's going to happen is it's going to first thing, whenever we get a request, it goes through body parser. After it goes through body parser, it goes through cores. Then we are going to say, hey, server, use our add time middleware. So on every single request, it's going to grab a new date and throw it into our res.locals. Okay, so in theory, unexpected token because I forgot an arrow function. Okay, so in our customers.pagenum, we now have access to our res.locals.request time. And not only do we have access to it when our page loads, which we can prove by refreshing this page and coming over here and remembering to save the server and then refreshing our page again. See, we've got access to our res.locals. Well, that is running because we told the server, hey, use this middleware that I created. And this middleware is adding in our request time for us. So now on every single endpoint, it is running this middleware for us and passing it down. So when our function runs, we have access to something that has happened up here. And we can prove that because if we take our console log and throw it even on our hello world, when we go to our backend server and hit 3001, we've got access to the time that that request came in. So that may seem kind of weird that you may say, well, why not just throw that in every function? We're going to explore that a little bit in our auth that we are going to build out, our authentication. So I'm just going to comment those out for now. Okay, so we're going to go back to our front end. And we're going to go out of the customers and back to our first initial screen. All right, there's a fair amount of setup we've got to do to get this to work. First thing we need to do is we need to create a new model called user.js. And I'm going to steal the whole customer information and just drop it in to user.js. I'm doing this on the back end in my models folder. And I'm going to say define the user, where the user ID is still an integer, and they are going to have an email, which is going to be a data type.string, and a password, which is a data type.string. Now, I should make you all come off mute and repeat after me. We never store an unencrypted password in the database. This is the least secure way to build a login system, short of emailing the password to the user directly. We should never, ever, ever be storing a password in the database unencrypted. With that said, I'm going to be super hypocritical here and store the password in the database unencrypted. In upcoming modules, you will learn how to make this much more secure. There are about 6 security rules I am breaking just so we can go through this demo of the middleware and understanding a super basic authentication system. In general, you should never, ever, ever store a password in the database unencrypted. There's like, it was like when the attorney came in on Monday and had her prepared, these opinions are my own. They do not represent my employer. They are strictly my own employee. They do not represent any past employers. That is all of, I'm saying that for the password here. We never, ever store a password unencrypted. Okay. So the user ID is going to be super simple. It's going to have an email and a password. So I'm actually going to pop open Beekeeper Studio, go into our appliances database, and I've got my user here, and I go to Beekeeper, and my user table is not here. Why not?
Because you need to link the file.
Kyle, you're still unmuted.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Link the file, right? You need to.
Yes. You got it. We need to go to db.js, and we just need to pull in our const user equals require r.user and give it access to the database connection we have just created. So when I go to my Beekeeper Studio and I refresh, I now have my users table. How nice. I am going to come in here and go to my query and just say insert into users. And that's going to be my email, did I say? Email and password. So my email and my password and my values are going to be testy@mictesterson.com. Should be double quotes. And my password is going to be super secret. I'm going to run. And column testy@mictesterson.com does not exist. I am always super terrible at remembering what version of SQL Postgres likes for quotes. Single quotes. Syntax near email. Well, I'm going in reverse. Okay, now it's saying created at violates a restriction. So I've got to do a created at and an updated at and throw in a now and a now. Created at needs to be in quotes. Updated at needs to be in quotes.
Max, is that something we should just be in the habit of doing? I feel like we've gotten that message a couple times. To add the created at and.
Yes, if you have a created at and a updated at, we can disable that in here by adding in an option where we say timestamps is false, and that would prevent the column from being created. But because I did not put that on the initial one, and because it's kind of a good practice to know when your user was created, it's a good idea that when you do an insert statement by hand, that you do your created at and your updated at. So with me suffering through some SQL, I got my customer showing up in the database. And you know what? I'll leave it here. Okay. So we've got our customer created. Now we need to go get our login screen working. So I'm going to come over to my front end code, and I am going to say in my login, I would like a const login button clicked. It's going to be an event, and our event is going to be prevented for the default option. And then I come down here to my form and I say on submit, and I will say my login button is clicked. I want to make sure my type submit is here. Okay, so our email is going to come from our event.target, which is our form.email. And I need to make sure that my ID is email. Then down on my input, I'm going to make my input a ID of password. Then I'm going to do password, and I need the value from both of those. And we are going to not get too far ahead of ourselves and do our email and our password, and jump over to our front end, do a@a.com, ABC, hit login. Ooh. Save. Login button clicked on submit of my form. Oh, you know what? I probably have this link. I've linked to customers in here just so when we clicked the button, it took us in without having to auth us. So I'm going to take that out. And refresh and go back to our sign-in page. And now I'm going to do a@a.com and ABC and hit login, and I get a@a.com and ABC. Okay, so I've got access to my form. Now I need to send that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go steal my fetch, because yes, I'm lazy, and I'm going to fetch to log in. And what does my body need to contain? It needs to contain both my email and my password. Repeat after me. We should never, ever send an unencrypted password unless we are at least using one level of encryption with HTTPS. Because we're sending it to our front end, we're okay.
You want us to repeat it, right?
We should never, ever send an unencrypted password unless it is at least going over HTTPS. Okay. Someday you're going to look back on these and laugh and go, ha, 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 I just lost my job because I sent a password unencrypted and all the data just leaked out of my database. So we never want to send a password unless it is over an encrypted method. Okay. So all of this is great. We're going to say const data is equal to our response, our await response .json, and then we will console log out our data. And because we are using await, we need to come up here and say that this is async. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit login, and I get this lovely 404 not found. Why is it not found? Not the port number. We're using 3001, but that's a good guess. We are using this login endpoint, but we have not come to our server and told it, hey, you are going to get a post request to our login. Our login is going to be an async rec res. What do you think we're going to do in this?
If we're posting, doesn't that mean we're adding content? Or
Not always. In
No?
general, it does.
Mhm.
But in this particular case, it's just a way for us to send the data up and use a body on it.
Okay.
So there are times that you use a post just because you want to send a body, but you're not actually creating something on it. In general, yes, when you're doing a database operation, when you're doing CRUD, post and create are always tied together, or an insert into. But in this case, we're just using post because we want to include a body on it.
When we connect to the database, we do db.authenticate. Can we use that .authenticate for something related?
No, that authenticate is tied just for the backend connecting into the database.
Okay.
But we do kind of want to build our own authentication, and Shaw, you're on the right track with using a user ID. So what we want to do is we actually want to go to the database and find if there is a user. So we are going to await customer.find max user.find one, where their email is equal to the rec.body.email. And so we're just going to console log that. And then we are going to res.send back an empty object just while we're working. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit my login button, and it's going to yell at me and tell me user is not defined. Well, when we did our import, we did that in db.js. So we need to export it from db.js and come back over to our server and import in our user. So now user should be defined. I come back over here, I do a login, and now I get a null. Okay, well, let's go to our database. Our database doesn't have an A at a.com, so it makes sense that it would be null. So we just ran into our first case for the user auth. If there isn't a user DB, res.send back an error that says user does not exist at that email address. So we're going to come back to our front end, and we are going to say if data.error alert the data.error. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to hit my login button, and I get a user does not exist at that email address. Okay, that's nice. So we are going to now do a login for testy@mctesterson.com. And if we log in, nothing happens here yet. We've still got things to do in the front end, but in our back end, we've got access to our user ID, our email, and our password. Well, that's nifty. So we're going to say if the userdb.password equals the rec.body.password, then res.send success true, else res.send our error password does not match the user account. Okay, I'm going to save that. Come back over here. I'm going to log in. Now I'm going to get my password does not match the user account. Okay, now if I do my super secret password and log in, I got my success true in the console. So we need to do the next step, which is, hey, if there isn't a data.error, if we get a data.success instead, send back a, take us to the window location of /customers. It's a very hacky way of doing a redirect. There are better ways of doing that through the router. but I'm going to just cheat for now and dump us over to the customers page. So I'm going to come back
We only
here.
have one C in success on the back end. I don't know if that's going to cause a problem.
Ooh. Thank you. And come over here. I'm going to log in and I make it to our customers page. Okay. All really cool, but we've got another problem. Our customers are coming in here, right? And if we go to our front end and look at our customers, we can access our customers by doing a GET request. So if I come in here and I go to Postman, it's like playing the monitor lottery. Where will it open? Oh, on the right one this time. I can make a GET request to customers page 1, and I get all of my customers out. But I'm not logged in on Postman. How does it know that I'm logged in? We need some way of telling the server, hey, only logged in users should be getting access to the customers. So that's where we're going to go almost full circle and use a middleware for that. So we are going to come up here, and instead of our rec.body, because remember, every request isn't going to have a body. Instead, we are going to look in the headers, because every request can have a header. And so we are going to say headers and headers, and I think that's all we need. So on our front end, now instead of in our login, instead of sending it in the body, we're just going to tack on our headers and say username and password. And we'll just comment that out for now. And we want to see if that still works. Email, I mean, and password. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to go back to my login page. I'm going to hit login. Get user does not exist. I do testy at mctesterson.com and super secret. And if I hit login, still takes me to my customers. So we just move that up to our headers, because remember, not every function, every endpoint is going to have access to the body. So I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to create a const is logged in, which is going to take a rec, a res, and a next. Going to put that in here, and I am going to say, hey, check is logged in, and pass it my rec and my res. So we just moved it out to another function. We haven't done anything different on that yet. But in here, I'm going to refresh. I'm actually going to go back out. I want to make sure that's still working. Testy at mctesterson.com and super secret login. Failed to fetch. Okay. I have to make that async and make that a wait. Okay, log in. Okay, we're in, we're good. So they have stored our login info. We have validated them. They made it to the login screen. We need to make it so other endpoints are going to use this is logged in. So what we are going to do is we are going to go up to we're actually going to take that whole function and put it up closer to the top. And what we are going to do, I can take out my console log user DB. Changing my mind. I'm going to break things here. So I'm going to copy all of this and put it back into my login. I'm breaking don't repeat yourself, but I want to focus on the middleware aspect. So my is logged in middleware If there's not a user DB, I still want to res.send, hey, you're not signed in. If the password doesn't match, I still want to send, hey, res.send password does not match. If they do make it through, instead of res.sending, I want to say move on to the next part of the endpoint. So I'm going to say next there instead. And now I'm going to come down to my customer's endpoint. And before I get to my rec res, I'm going to say is logged in middleware. Now I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back over to Postman and I'm going to run my request and I get a nice error that says where parameter email undefined.
Do you need parentheses after is logged in middleware?
No, it should know that that's a function and chain it properly.
Okay.
Am I doing it to the right? Oh, it's doing exactly what it wants. It's saying email is undefined. And so we actually need to add another if statement here that says if not rec.headers.email, or there is not a rec.headers.password, res.send error, you did not provide authentication information. Else, continue on down. Oops. Okay, let's try that again. Let's go back to Postman. I'm going to hit send. You did not provide any authentication information. Well, that's nifty. Let's go to the headers. I'm going to add a header with a email, and the email is going to be testy@mctesterson.com. I'm going to hit send. You do not provide authentication information because I did not include a password of super, and I'm going to hit send. Password does not match for the user account. But now, as soon as I send in super secret, I get all of my customer information. Okay. That's definitely a lot. We want to do one more step, and then we will call it an evening and let you guys catch up and ask any questions. What happens now? I've got that working. And actually, when I think about it, well, I've got my middleware here. I can reuse that is logged in middleware on any one of my endpoints. So if I don't want them to be able to add a new user, I can just add my is logged in middleware. And now they wouldn't be able to create a new user unless they provided me their email and their password. Okay, that's nifty. But what happens when we go to our front end now and it just blows up? Because we need to provide that email and password from the login screen into all of our API calls that are going to make it. So I'm actually going to go back to our login screen and I'm going to say, hey, if we got in, use this nifty little thing called local storage and store their email in there for me. Local storage is something that we can access anywhere in our website. So local storage is a way to basically save information into the browser storage itself, and also store the local storage password. Repeat after me. We should never store an unencrypted password in the browser or in local storage. Okay. So we're going to save that here, and we're going to go to our customers. And when we do our GET request, we also need to add our headers with a email Did I screw that up? No, I didn't. Okay, email of our local storage dot email and our password with our local storage dot password. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to back out to our login page. I am going to log in with testy@micktesterson.com. And my password super secret. And when I hit login, I get my customers. But if I get tricky and I go into an incognito window, whoa, that changed my camera angle. Instead, if we go into a new incognito window, it's not going to have access to my local storage here. So we can throw in our customers, and now the page just crashes on us because we're not logged in. And we will just do one more. I'm going to go to my nav bar and to my, nope, not my nav bar, my sidebar. And on my sign out, I'll do an on click that says, delete local storage dot password, delete local storage dot email, and then window dot location to my page. So when I hit sign out, I'm actually signed out. And if I go back to my customers, it crashes on me. And if I go back to my login and do testy@micktesterson.com, I can do my super secret, make it in, and have my customers load.
You need to put that on the search fetch request too, right?
Yes, I do. And so in theory, that's when we would start making a custom fetch that we would call like API that we would be able to reuse across multiple components. But yeah, I will put that down here as well. And in theory, we should go through our endpoint and put that on every single, we should go through our backend and put that on every endpoint that shouldn't be getting access to data unless they're logged in, which would be a common thing to make it so you can't access any of those. Okay, that was a lot. We covered auth and middleware at the same time. What questions do you guys have on that? Do you get the concepts of when you would use a middleware, kind of how we can authenticate, this notion of next, of moving on to the next function or the next part of our endpoint? Any questions on authentication? Anything like that? Just general questions, opening up the floor.
So like the middleware is just like another layer, and it could be for anything, but here we're using it for specifically like a block. Okay.
Yep. So when you think about your endpoint, it's easy to think the endpoint is just this here, but really there is a chain of things that happened before we got to your section of code. What happened before we got here, before we even got here, is that body parser ran and cores ran. And so what body parser did is it looked and it went, I know that your data is coming in. I'm going to look at the header type. I'm going to see that it's application JSON. I'm going to modify rec.body and I'm going to dump in the parsed data. And then cores came in and it was like, hey, Express, I know you're a security nut, but ignore any of the cores information. I want anything to be involved. Then it's going to come down here and go, oh, you want this is logged in middleware to run. Before we even touch this code, we're going to come through and run through all of this. Then we are only going to run the endpoint code if next is called here. If next isn't called, we will never get to this chunk of your code. But if next is called in this function, then we will run the next chunk of code, which is this. So every time we go through a middleware, middleware could theoretically add to the rec or to the res. We happen to use res.locals and added some information in there. So a common thing we could do in our middleware is we could say, hey, if the password matches, make our res.locals.user equal to our user DB. And so now, if theoretically we wanted to know what user was accessing the customers, we could console.log our res.locals.user.email. And because our middleware is running, and because our middleware stored res.locals.user for us, in theory, if we scroll down to the bottom of our terminal and refresh our customers page, we can actually see testy@mctesterson.com coming out. So that is another common use for middleware, is not only making sure the user is logged in, but that we also are able to pull out user information, like user ID would also come out as well. So if we refresh, we're able to get access to the user ID too there.
I
That
still
is
don't
it.
understand why you don't need parentheses after the is logged in middleware and the API in the get request or whatever, the get when it's receiving the request.
Yeah, because it knows everything passed in here is always going to be a function. Even if we have multiple functions happening after it. So it's the same reason why this is technically a function and we don't have to put the parentheses here to run it. Express knows that everything after this first piece of the endpoint route, it knows that it is going to run whatever functions come after that as parameters. So we can actually put multiple middlewares in here, or even do an inline middleware where we just, do another rec res next. But middleware is always going to be a function, and Express just happens to know any parameter that comes in after the route URL is going to be a function, so we should run it.
I hadn't even noticed that we didn't have the parentheses after the async function either. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that goes to the parent because I told you so. It's because Express tells us, hey, just pass in functions and we happen to know to execute them. I think if we actually put this in here, yeah, it's going to crash the server, because what JavaScript is doing is, one, it tells us router.get requires a callback function, but got object instead. What's happening is it's trying to run this code, and as it's trying to boot up the server, it's actually calling is logged in middleware. And it's like, no, we don't want that middleware to run right now. We only want that middleware to run once this endpoint is hit. And so putting them there does bad things, because while it's trying to boot up the server, it's trying to run our middleware at that moment, and it doesn't have access to rec or res or any of that because the server is still booting up. Ladies and gentlemen, we have made it to the end of not only module 7, but module 8, 1 minute ahead of schedule, I may add. Thrown a lot at you guys, but I believe I have actually covered every required part of the curriculum. So we've made it to the end. Tomorrow will be a working session for your capstones. Please be prepared to come with not only your code, but also with questions around how to make it full stack, how to incorporate some of these features into it. Again, I will reiterate that this is a very insecure way of doing authentication. You should never store a password unencrypted in the database. Should never store a password unencrypted in local storage. You should be using a notion of tokens, which will be covered in a later module. and there are ways that you don't have to query your database every single time on every single endpoint using tokens. But it is the probably the most common way of using using a middleware is for authentication. So lots of other ways of using middleware. I am going to post all of this in GitHub, so you guys can reference this code if you would like to. I will create the assignment by the end of tomorrow night's class for thinking through all of these features we covered and trying to attempt a couple of them. You will at least need to have your customers table working and the ability to add in a new customer. And then I will create a long list of all the different things that you could add into this, like login, like the update and delete operations, like our form validation, like our, oh God, I can't even remember all the things. Pagination, all of that stuff. So I will have a list of ideas that you can add to it. And then I will just require you to do at least one of them. Just get one of them working. And if you're feeling super ambitious, you can get more of them working than that. So let me get this up in GitHub, and then I will stick around if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, I am a minute over. So you are off to prepare for tomorrow's class and get some stuff lined up for your capstone questions for tomorrow. Office hours will be at 6:30 on Friday. And don't forget to fill out the 30-second feedback form. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. Now I just have to wait 3 minutes for 170 meg of node modules to copy over into the classroom repo.
Is it possible to get help? I'm behind because like yesterday I copied your code and commented mine out. So I'm behind. I'm like 2 days behind, but I have this error and it's just like a comma or a thing and I just don't know what it is. And
Yep.
Okay. It looks exactly like yours, I thought, but it is not. Let me share my screen.
And I wouldn't think of this as being 2 days behind, because the end goal for this weekend is not to do like everything that we've covered in class in the past 2 days. Like that would be a lot to expect you to do all of that. So I wouldn't think about it as being behind. I would think about it as being selectively ahead on the features you choose to implement this weekend.
Right.
Okay. Method, post, headers, body, form data. So my scroll up a little bit. Why is it cranky with you there? Scroll down a little bit.
Maybe I'm missing
Did you
another.
save?
Yeah. Oops.
Line 47.
But actually, maybe I'm missing another curly brace. I thought I wasn't, but if
Oh.
you go,
Take out the curly braces around form data. Yeah, nope, that was it. Leave that bottom one in there.
oh,
That's it.
oh, it didn't need to be.
And then you'll
What?
need to JSON.stringify that form data at some point.
Okay.
But yeah, if you save, you should not get failed to compile anymore. Yeah.
So it didn't need, I must have miswatched you. Keeping that straight is hard. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, paying attention to when Prettier stops working is like a secret tool that you can use of like, oh, my syntax is a little off.
All right. Thank you.
No problem.
I don't know how to stop this. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Hey Max, this is Latonia. I have a question, but it's a capstone question.
Does anyone else have questions? Okay, then feel free to get out of here or stick around if Latonia, you don't mind other people hearing it.
Oh, I don't mind. So when I click from, I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay. I must have deleted something because like when I click around in here, they all work, but when I click from pricing to my story, you see how it doesn't work?
Yep.
But all the rest of them, they all work. Like, isn't that weird? So like, what did I do?
Does that happen on your local host as well?
This is, oh, no, it does. Yeah, this is the deploy, but it does. That's where I found it, was in the local host.
All right, my guess is that my story has a space in it, and so that's what's causing the problem. But that's, yeah, but that's just my gut.
What does that mean? Like I put an extra.
No, that like, look at all your other links. None of your other links have a space in them. All your other links there are one word, but my story is 2 words.
But I always wrote, okay, I'll check it and see, but I always wrote it as one. Oh, I see what you mean, because there's a space here.
That's just my gut. We need to debug a little bit more. All of that looks right. Pricing.
And I did go back through the code and everything. I mean, it looked the way it's supposed to. So I actually thought it was a CSS issue. I thought maybe I didn't include it on something.
Yeah, go down to where like you have your underbody links.
Mm-hmm.
If underbody links is my story, body link, my story. And it work. You can pull up my story from anything else. It's only when you go to from pricing to my story that it causes the problem.
Yeah.
All right, give me 1 second. I'm gonna open the code that you sent me.
Okay.
And see if my next theory is that you have my story, like the underbody links in my story in pricing or vice versa.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh my God, it's a gig big. You are lucky I've got fast internet.
It took like several minutes to upload. I was so irritated. I think I put that in the message. I'm like, yeah, it must be huge. It took a while.
All right, well, give me a minute. I'm still downloading.
Okay.
Maybe do scroll up to whatever the ID is on your, I think it's body link my story. Maybe just do a Command F for that in your CSS. Okay, and those are the only two places that you use it. What about To My Story? TO, yeah. Okay, and those are the only two places you use that.
Yeah, I went through all through this, trying to check, and I did look in the inspector, but it didn't have an error in there. It was just showing
I'm almost done downloading.
okay.
Now the next thing is it going to take an hour for it to unzip on me?
Oh goodness.
Mm.
The only thing weird that I did do was I was like adding in spans and breaks because I was trying to get a certain styling, but I didn't do anything directly with any of this. That's why I'm really confused about. And it was like the very last thing, like after I had done everything, all of a sudden I noticed that that was an issue.
My boss sent me a message. If you see me typing, ignore it. I've got a really weird bug that you're gonna start your day off wonderfully tomorrow. I sent him a Giphy of OMG, can't wait. All right, let me open this in VS Code and open this in terminal and npm start. Okay. Oh, you know why it's so big, Latonia? You have all your video files in here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you needed everything.
No, I'd rather you send everything than undersend. Pricing. Wow. Okay. Well, the good news is I can reproduce the error, which is always one of the hardest things.
Oh, okay.
And that is in, is that body links? My story. And
I'm sorry, everybody. I thought we'd like look at it and Max's super genius would kick in. Not that it's not kicking in, but
how dare you? Yeah, if you guys want to head out, you don't have to stick around. I don't think we're gonna have any huge breakthrough. It's gonna be some stupid little thing that makes you want to throw your computer out the window. Div null, that closes that one. Connect, that closes that one. My story, that closes there. Body links, that closes there. Latonia, just make it so, you know, if they click on pricing, they can't make it back to their, back to my story. You know, they've already figured
Not
out that they
very
want to know about your
user-friendly.
pricing. Okay, so, oh.
It happened. Don't tell me, what is it?
Let me confirm. Oh, I need to go to the, I'm bumping you on screen share and
Oh, okay.
sharing my, nope, desktop too.
I can stop. You want me to stop?
Nope, I'm all good. So let me put it back to what it was. So the issue we were having is that when you made it to, I scrolled past it, didn't I? Yeah.
Yep, it's right in the middle.
My story works fine. And then when you go to pricing, now all of a sudden I can't like click on my story. So
Yeah.
the first thing I did is I added an on click, and even the on click wasn't working. And I'm like, okay. And you've got this lovely like hover going on that works on everything else. But like, as soon as I get close to that, it's changing to a cursor. So I'm like, where does it get that cursor from? So I highlight a little bit and look at how big that 4 is.
Is it
that
over?
4 is coming up over the my story. And so if I come in to your pricing, I know this is super tiny, and change the margin top on that, just by moving that down a little bit, now I can get to my story.
So it was literally just covering it?
Yep.
That's so crazy.
So I think, because obviously you probably don't want to add more padding onto the top of it, I think what you should be able to do is just Z index this to like 2, and then go all the way up to your my story, and Z index this to a 3. And now your my story will work.
My goodness. Okay. I would have never figured that out. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's
No
kind of
problem.
embarrassing, but thank you.
Well,
And
no, that's an example of like where, when's the last time I've run into that? It's gotta be at least 2 or 3 years since I've written code where it was like literally just on top of it and you couldn't tell. You could have set a background color on the text 44 and that would have helped figure it out. Or I guess you could have also gone, let's see what would have happened if I went into my inspect element and I hovered over my, well, that's because I fixed the Z index. What if I take the Z index out? Another way you could have done it is if you hovered over the my story, you see how it's still highlighting the 44. That would be another hint of like, oh, that 44, the text width on it is just so big that it's blocking my story. But when I hover over to pricing, I'm getting just that pricing div. So that would be another debug tool that you could use to find that.
Okay, I'll probably never forget now, but I actually did hover and I just wasn't making a connection between them. Thank you so much.
No problem. Hey, if it takes me more than 3 minutes to fix it, it's probably a good bug. All right, I'll see you guys later. You have an awesome evening. Susan, did you have a question?
Oh, was the 44 a div and it was just overlapping?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if it was an image or something. It's just okay, cool.